Hello and welcome back to the MLB DFS slate breakdown for Friday, June 28th. We made it to Friday. We made it to the end of the month. Now we got a big 13-game slate to go over today. I think it is a fun one. There's a lot of hitting that's very interesting. Pitching, maybe a little weak, but there's definitely a couple guys to consider there. Now, before we get into it, come join us at LineStar. It's only $39.99 per month. Gets you access to everything we do. All the props, all the DFS. You get it all. One low price. Or you could do the yearly option, $240. It's only $19 a month that way. You get big time discount. I recommend going that way. And then we got you covered for all the sports throughout the entire year. The best deal by far in DFS. Let's go. Let's get into it. And what we will cover today is yesterday's winning lineups, the perfect lineups from yesterday. Then we will get into some pitchers to consider, followed by stacks to consider. Now, starting with yesterday's perfect lineup on FanDuel, remember that FanDuel had a 6-game slate. DraftKings had 4, so the perfect lineups are way different. Jose Barrios was the pitcher you needed on DraftKings. He went up, or on FanDuel, he went absolutely nuts. And then we had a 3-man Baltimore stack, a 2-man Cincinnati, and a 2-man Toronto. George Springer was really the key of yesterday. He was just shy of 7% owned and went for 54 points. So you're not finding a winning lineup without him. And yesterday's winning lineup went to Stonier, who had Zach Wheeler. Didn't even have Barrios, but the key was that he had George Springer. He also had a 4-man Cincy stack, 3-man Toronto, and then a one-off with Nolan Arenado, who got it done. So all in all, he had a great lineup. He got it done, and congrats to them. They won $10K. Now, moving on to DraftKings perfect lineup, 4-game slate. Jose Barrios, Davis Daniel at only 5,500 got it done. He went for 36 points, 8 innings, 8 Ks versus Detroit. Have a day, son. Then lineup-wise, we had a 4-man Cincinnati stack, 2-man Toronto, and 2 one-offs. And then the winning lineup went to Kevin Robb, 21-28, who didn't even have Davis Daniels. But they did have Barrios, they had Flaherty, and a 3-man Toronto stack with a 5-man Cincy. So good old 5-3, got it done. And they won by 7 points without having Daniels and having a 5-3 stack. So congrats to them. They did beat Nerdy Tenor, who, let's see what Nerdy had. Had Daniel, had Barrios. Oh, he just got smoked by having 3 guys that really didn't do much in his lineup, but nailed the pitching, and his hitting was just off a little bit. So congrats to Kevin Robb. You got it done. You won $50K. Let's move on to today's slate, starting with DraftKings and the high ownership. There are some situations weather-wise we need to watch today. Right now, it looks like the worst is the White Sox, but I do think all the situations likely play today. Now, highest owned pitcher on the slate looks to be Logan Gilbert. Logan Gilbert, 17% owned, 4-star alert score. Versus Minnesota, it's not an easy matchup. Now, Gilbert is better at home. He's averaging 26% more fantasy points at home, but Minnesota, 204 ISO, 345 WOBA, only strikes out at 18%. It is not a very easy matchup, and in this situation, you know, Gilbert has some upside. He can work deep into games, went 8 innings the last 2 games in a row, 6.2 before that. But his K rate isn't really high. He gets there by being efficient, by working deeper into games, allowing that K rate to still get him 7, 8 Ks in a given night. Now, his upside is very limited versus Minnesota. It's going to be harder for him to work deeper into games, and they're not striking out versus righties very much. So for that reasons, I am a little worried about him, but he is clearly one of the better pitchers on this slate. Just a 20.2% combined K rate at almost 10K. He's a little low for my liking, but pitching is rough today. So gonna have to figure something out. On DraftKings, we're got to pick 2 pitchers. You may just have to kind of have some Gilbert because pitching is that bad. Next, we got Slade Ciccione at 6.2K, 16% owned, 2.5 alert score. He is versus Oakland, who isn't great versus righties, and they've been real bad lately versus righties, but Slade isn't anything to write home about either. 4.87 FIP over his last 20, only an 18% K rate. The only thing he has going for him in the K rate department is that Oakland strikes out a lot, and they're just not that great of an offense. So I understand why Slade is coming in, but he is not that great of a pitcher either, and it's just a tough spot. He's also averaging 76% less fantasy points at home. His worst games are at home. Against San Diego, got crushed. Against Cincinnati, got crushed. Against the Angels, got crushed. Doesn't mean that he's good away. He's just been way worse at home. So I think there's definitely some caution here being one of the higher owned pitchers. He's cheap, and that's the whole reason he's getting into people's lineups right now. I don't think you have to go there. Next, Drew Thorpe versus Colorado Rockies. This one is very, very intriguing to me. So Drew Thorpe is a big-time prospect. He is in the top 100 of, prospects coming up. He's getting his 4th start. And it's versus Colorado Rocky team that strikes out 27% and is just awful versus righties. Now, we've only had 3 starts, so I'm not looking into this data too much. But the StatCast data does look decent, and I do think there's more strikeout upside here. His first 3 starts have all been on the road. He at least is now at home. It's going to be a little more comfortable for him, and I really like the upside here. This is a guy that's been in the minors and has done very, very well in the minors. I think his K rate should probably be more in the low 20s. And if that's the case against Rockies at a 27.2% K rate, this combined K rate is likely more in that 23 to 25% range. And I'm totally on board for that. If he's going a little lower owned, which it looks like he is, he's one of my highest owned pitchers probably. I think I'm intrigued. He's cheap. There's a lot of ways this can go right, and the downside is only if he has another one of these outings versus Arizona, but I just don't think he does. I think most likely situation is between the outing versus Seattle and Detroit, with more upside than this Detroit matchup. So I'm intrigued absolutely to go to Thorpe. Next, Ronel Blanco. Blanco versus the Mets. They're striking out at 22%, but they are very good versus righties, and it is in New York. Blanco has been decent this year. I just don't see a ton of upside in this matchup, and that is my worry. However, what we have seen from Blanco is when he gets it going, he's been getting in that perfect lineup. So I think it's very hard to project him, and I think his ownership should come lower than what it's at currently. But we've seen that the regression monster is likely going to come soon. He has a 4.73 FIP over his last 20 starts with a 3.01 ERA. That is just not likely to consider. Over his last 5, 4.25, 2.97 ERA. Those things are just very hard to consider. The Mets have been hot. I have a hard time wanting to play Blanco today in this spot. Possible regression. Mets have been good. But Blanco does have a shot, at least. Next, Charlie Morton. 4.5 star alert score versus Pittsburgh. I like this spot for him a lot. He's averaging 20% more at home. He's been good versus Pittsburgh in the past. Pittsburgh versus righties is nothing scary, and they strike out at 23%. All that with the fact that he's probably due for some positive regression here. 3.86 FIP over his last 20, 4 over his last 5. But that's with a 6 ERA. Strikeout rate is high enough. I'm very much intrigued by Morton. I do think his price is a little bit high, but he's one of the better pitchers on the slate, and I'm fully willing to take some Morton in this situation, especially with the state of pitchers on this slate. Next, we got Bailey Ober. Ober, the last couple starts, has been just amazing. However, it still comes with a FIP of 5. He did have 3 poor starts before this one these 2 versus Oakland, which he absolutely dominated. So there's definitely some worry here. When he faced decent offenses, he struggled recently. When he faced poor offenses, he crushed them. Now, Seattle's kind of in between a poor offense and a decent offense. They do hit the ball hard, but they strike out high and they have a low WOBA. So I wouldn't be that surprised if there's a home run or 2 in this spot. And it really is going to come down to, are they solo shots or are there guys on base? If there's nobody on base, I think there's a very good shot of Bailey Ober going, say, 6 or 7 innings with 6 or 7 Ks and 1 or 2 earned runs, having himself a game. And on this pitcher slate, that sounds very good to me. So I am absolutely interested in Ober, but it is a little bit worrisome right here. He's not consistent. It's hard to count on him, but when he's kind of on, his ceiling is there to really get it done. So I'm very much intrigued by Ober. Next, we got Yusei Kikuchi. Man, what to think about him? He is the most inconsistent pitcher. We have seen it for years now. He goes on these runs where he's absolutely awful, and then he'll go on these runs where he's like unhittable. What do we get tonight? I don't know. It's a very tough matchup, though, and the Yankees have seen him a lot and touched him up a lot. I don't really want to pick on him. I don't really want to try and pick on this Yankees team, but at least the 2 times he faced them this year, he's done really well. Now, I will have to say that's in the beginning of the year when he was pitching really well. He's not pitching that well anymore. So I absolutely have my concerns with him. But, I mean, there is some upside. And this Yankees team, the last couple games, has been struggling a little bit. So can he get there? Yes. Will he? Hard to really say. I would say most likely not. And our projections are saying probably not. Next, we got Nick Pivetta versus my San Diego Padres. Now, this is another really tough spot. Pivetta has a ton of upside, but Padres don't really strike out much. Now, I do have to say that Luis Arraez was out of the lineup last game. His hand did get hit by a ball. We're not sure if he's going to be back in the lineup today. But we also have Fernando Tatis already out of the lineup. If those 2 are out, this lineup starts to look a lot worse. And as long as Pivetta misses a couple key spots, it becomes pretty interesting. However, the lefties are hitting the ball really well right now. Cronenworth is hitting well. Jackson Merrill's been on fire. Jurickson Profar, who's a switch hitter, has been on fire. These lefties can absolutely get to Pivetta, who is a righty. So this is a tough call. And this is a spot that I kind of want to play on both sides of it because pitching is rough today. And Pivetta has that 30-point upside at only 8.3K. If he is on today, he can rack up those 8 strikeouts and 6 innings with the win, even though there is nice hitting weather in Boston today. So I am absolutely a little concerned or a little interested in Pivetta, but I'm also a little interested in that Padres offense. Logan Webb, one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher on this slate. The guy has a 2.66 FIP, 2.92 over his last 5. K-rate is down a little bit, and he's facing the very dangerous Dodgers. I don't really want to face the Dodgers, but he is one of the better pitchers on this slate, and sometimes you just got to go with talent. So he is in my player pool. I'm not taking him out, but I am definitely not getting very much of him. He has had some decent games versus the Dodgers, but over the last 3 years, the ceiling games that he's had just aren't going to get you there, and that is my worry. I think most likely he goes 6 innings, allows 3 runs, has 4 or 5 Ks, and it just isn't enough to really propel you into winning a GPP. So I'm not taking him out, but I'm really not trying to push him in. Colin Ray versus the Cubs. He's cheap enough where you can consider him, but I'm not really loving it. Max Scherzer is a big-time question mark. He only went 57 pitches last game. Hard to imagine him getting up to 90, but he looked great last game. So I can't put him in because he's facing a very tough opponent and that possible pitch limit. If I hear that he can go to 100 pitches today, I'm going to have some of him because he looked really good. However, I think it's not likely, and with that, he's kind of on the outside looking in for me. Really, nobody else I am really intrigued on in this slate. It's pitching is rough. I talked about more guys that I'm really considering already, and talking about the rest is kind of just beating my head against the wall here, trying to pick at something that I'm really not going to go to. Jamison Tyon at least had a very good outing last time out, and his 3.12 FIP over his last 5 is very intriguing. But Milwaukee's good versus righties, and that's another issue there. So let's get over to FanDuel. Let's talk about pitchers here. And highest owned is Charlie Morton. And with him being much cheaper on FanDuel, I think that makes sense. He would absolutely be one of my highest. Logan Gilbert. You know my worries, definite little upside concerns and a tough matchup, but the game total is 7, Seattle's favorite. I get why people are going there, and I don't mind it. I think Blanco may be going a little over-owned, but not taking him out of the pool. Bailey Ober, I think, is very intriguing. And Drew Thorpe, I'm probably going to have a lot of at 7.6K. I think there's a major upside, and if he becomes, if he stays one of these lower-owned pitchers, I will definitely have some. And last low-owned guy I'm truly considering is Nick Pivetta. Now let's get over to some stacks and see what we can drum up here. Now our highest-owned value stacks of the day have some little cold brew action there. All right, so highest owned value of the slate, we got the Angels. Very intrigued. They had a good game last night. Looks like they're starting to hit again. Maeda isn't very good. FIP of 4.94 over his last 20. The thing with Maeda is he's kind of hot or cold. He can be good, but regardless, he's probably not staying in the game very long. So definitely a bit intrigued with him. And after him, bullpen is meh. So kind of interesting. Oakland, I'm absolutely intrigued with this Oakland team against Slade. Slade has been terrible at home. If he gives up 6 runs again at home like he has, this very low-owned Oakland stack is going to start looking very, very interesting. Big-time leverage there as well. Boston popping up versus Randy Vasquez. I absolutely love the Boston stack today. I don't think Vasquez is any good at all. 5.17 FIP over his last 20, 5.84 over his last 5. I love this spot for Boston, and I'm going to have a lot of them. It's also one of the better hitting conditions as far as ballpark weather, winds, all of that. Now, it's not super warm, but the winds are slightly blowing out. It's 70-plus degrees, and in that park, that plays pretty well. Next, Tigers are popping up against Zach Plesac. I'm a little bit intrigued with that one, too. I just don't think Plesac's very good, and Tigers are cheap. We got value there. I think there's a lot of value on this slate that we can use for small or bigger slates, so we can pay up for pitching if we want, and we know there's not that many good pitchers on this slate, so this will also get you a little different, being able to pay up for some bats on some spots that you really like. And let's get into the highest owned stacks of the day, which is Boston, but it's sub 50%. Do not be worried about ownership if this is the case. You're talking about 5 guys under 10% owned each. So it doesn't really matter to me. I am absolutely fine with that, and it looks that ownership is just being spread across big time, and with that, let's just play whoever you want pretty much. Cleveland's popping up against Alec Marsh. 4.38 FIP over his last 5, 3.88 over his last 20. He has been playing decent lately. Now, the run total in this game is, the highest on the slate, or tied for the highest on the slate at 9.5? Yep. This game's 9.5. Padres, Boston, 9.5, and Detroit Angels are 9.5. So I do have some interest. I don't love trying to face Alec Marsh, though. He's been decent. I do like the other side of the game a little bit more with the Royals versus McKenzie. The reason being, McKenzie has not been able to stop people stealing bases, that people have been running wild versus him, and he's been getting crushed. So it's kind of a double whammy where not only are guys hitting him hard, but they're also able to score fantasy points by stealing bases. So and that Royal team steals a lot of bases, so I'm very intrigued by them. Don't mind Cleveland. I will have a little bit, but I'm not going to try and push extra of them tonight. Now our highest projected stacks are all right. We got Boston versus Randy Vasquez. I've said I love it, and I'm all on board for that. Also, I really don't think Vasquez is a very good pitcher. Now let's go to the ceiling stacks here. Do have to say, though, the Padres have been hot. They've won, I don't know, 6 or 7 straight, something like that. So definitely intrigued. All right, highest ceiling. We got Baltimore versus Max Scherzer. So one thing to consider here is, while Scherzer was very, very good last time out, he still has a 4.3 FIP over his last 20. And if he is limited, say, to 70 pitchers or something, that terrible Texas bullpen is going to come after him, and Baltimore can absolutely do a ton of damage in an inning or two. So, not even though it's Scherzer, I wouldn't be too scared off with some Boston. Minnesota's popping up versus Logan Gilbert. Minnesota is a good offense. I don't love trying to pick on Gilbert on this slate, but they can get it done. And Boston is popping up a little bit as well. Now let's check out the teams filter here so we can get a better little overview of some other stacks to consider. I do got to say that I think the Braves are actually a pretty interesting stack, and we haven't talked about them. All right, Boston, 5.1, highest implied total. Randy Vasquez behind him makes a whole lot of sense. Next, Atlanta. I am very intrigued with this one. Martin Perez, almost a FIP of 7 over his last 5. Over his last 20, 4.27. He's getting older, and he's getting worse. And this Atlanta team seems to be starting to hit. Still a little inconsistent, but I don't mind going with some Atlanta, especially with this bullpen being this bad behind Perez. Cleveland at 5, Detroit at 5, KC at 5, Angels at 5. All of them are interesting. I am super intrigued by KC. The one issue here is that Cleveland bullpen has been extremely good. So KC might have to get all of its work done against McKenzie. Hope he stays into the game a little longer and kind of piece them apart versus having just a giant inning and getting him out in the first, couple innings. Detroit versus Plesac is super interesting. Bullpen behind him is bad. Don't mind that whatsoever. Arizona is at 4.9 versus JP Sears, who hasn't been good. FIP of 5 over his last 20. FIP of 6 over his last 5, and allowing almost 39% hard contact. And Arizona's been hitting the ball much better as of late. White Sox versus Hudson. I don't mind sprinkling in a little bit of that one as a value stack there, nor do I mind Baltimore or Milwaukee. Frankie Montas has been kind of hit or miss. Back to being good recently. St. Louis are just kind of meh. Padres, I'm intrigued on Pivetta, facing Pivetta, purely for the situation. One, Padres have been hot, especially the lefties. Pivetta's a righty. Two, Pivetta can be kind of inconsistent, similar to, say, Yusei Kikuchi, where he can just get bombed on or just be electric. So you never really know which one you're going to see out of him. And if he's getting bombed on, San Diego could put up some runs. With that being said, I think the Yankees stack is pretty interesting, going under owned versus Kikuchi, who's allowing 36% hard contact, high average exit velocity, and a poor bullpen behind him. So those are pretty much who I'm interested in, and we will figure it out come lock time. Good luck, guys. It was a great week with you. I will be back next week, and let's make some money. Good luck. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our videos. It helps us a ton, helps me out personally, helps Shannon out. So let's go. Have a good one, guys. Bye.